Here they come.
Hello there. Today I've got to talk about the long gun I currently can't put down, and that's Sporebloom. With the buffs to its spread, it's feeling great again and is capable of amazing damage output, and as a single shot weapon, it's also got some fun build options beyond pure damage. I've got 3 different Sporebloom builds to go through today, 1 glass cannon, 1 tank, and 1 that's more in between. This thing is insanely fun to use and gets quite silly with the reload speed buff in boss rush, although as you can see from that intro fight, the boss rush buff is not at all required to melt normal bosses. Now, starting with the glass cannon build, we're obviously on Hunter Gunslinger. We need Hunter's Focus to tighten the spread on Sporebloom without it costing us an arm and a leg, and Gunslinger with Bulletstorm boosts reload speed for greatly improved DPS on single-shot weapons. And on the topic of reload, now is where we talk about manual reloads. When you're using any single-shot weapon in this game, you must learn to hit the reload button yourself instead of allowing the game to auto-reload for you. This lets you reload much faster and massively increases your DPS. Beyond just having a good build, good manual reload timing is the main deciding factor in how good your DPS with Sporebloom will be. In practice, manual reloads kind of just come down to mashing the reload key as soon as you fire, but there is a rhythm to it, and with some practice, you will be rewarded with much higher damage. Just as a demonstration of how impactful the manual reloads can be, here's a comparison of no manual reloads versus with manual reloads. So as you can see, we're in like the 7.5, 8.5k DPS range, depending on luck with crits. So now let's see how that changes with manual reloads. So as you can see, it's noticeably higher, and I'm not even that great at hitting the manual reloads. Bolt Jameson is quite insane with his manual reload timing. So you can get the DPS even higher than this if you're good with hitting those reloads. Now for the trinkets, we're on light roll for 0 hour for big damage and more crit. If you aren't willing to go to light roll, your best option is the abrasive whetstone, which will actually outdamage 0 hour overall. But bleed is the most common status effect for enemies and bosses to be immune to, and I've generally moved away from abrasive whetstone builds, especially for boss rush, where you're going to be going up against a variety of enemies. Infinity Pocket and Outcast Ring give us infinite ammo and 25% reload speed, so those are easy picks. And the last 2 slots here go to Akari Warband and Anastasia's Inspiration. Getting haste is great not only for the reload speed, but it's also very important to increase our evade speed. Combined with an evade speed fragment on the prism, and you'll be able to keep Hunter's Focus active through rolls at medium or lightweight. And as for Akari Warband, it's just this best singular crit ring, and you're going to need to perfect dodge while playing this classy build anyway. For our weapons, our long gun is obviously Sporebloom, and I prefer Momentum to ramp up the crit consistency, although you can experiment with things like Slayer if your manual reloads are good enough to benefit from even more reload speed. The handgun and melee honestly don't matter much because Sporebloom is great for both mobbing and bossing, and you won't ever swap away from it after entering a boss fight. You can bring something like Corrupted Rune Pistol to further buff damage, and you can also throw a Krell Axe with Transference to grant yourself increased reload speed, but it's never really worth reapplying either of these effects mid-fight, since just blasting away with Sporebloom just does more damage. So really you're free to bring whatever you want here. Something like Song of Aether can be nice as an insta-win button against mobs and aberrations, or you can do what I've done and just take Healing Shot for emergencies, since we want to spend our traits and other slots on things other than healing. For the traits, Fortify, Vigor, Swiftness, and Handling are going to be staple picks on all of these builds. We're also going into Expertise and Gifted for more uptime on skills, and then the rest is just Comfort and Survivability. On the builds where we're focusing on Haste, we're also going to always take Perception, because extra Haste is always nice, and you actually do get some benefit out of the slow, since you can use Spore Shot to control groups of enemies if they're surrounding you. For the Prism, I've just got a standard range Prism here with meta, munitions, gunfighter, sniper, or sharpshooter. The inclusion of evade speed here is quite important too, as mentioned earlier, and for your relic fragments, they're pretty much always going to be range crit damage, and reload speed. And now for some quick demo fights of this melting bosses. Now the balanced Sporebloom build. This is probably my favorite range build in the game right now, and it's a good compromise between the tank and glass builds, with damage and survivability in between the two. We're now using the Insulator Mutator on Sporebloom for the extra crit and shields, and then I've gone with Short Circuit on the Amulet. This is mainly just for the extra crit stats, although getting more bullet storms in boss fights can also be nice. For the rings, we're on the same ones as the glass cannon setup. Basically, this is the same as the glass cannon build, except we've got an extra layer of defense from Insulator and can afford to go to medium roll to wear more armor since we aren't using 0 hour. Optionally, you can choose to slot in Generating Band instead of Akari, and the extra sustain can be very nice for moving quickly in boss rush. For the prism, we're on the same standard range prism for this build as well. Things look pretty much the same as with the glass cannon build, but here are some quick demo fights. Now for the tank Sporebloom build, we're still on Hunter Gunslinger for the same reasons, but I've swapped out all the rings aside from Outcast Ring. Instead, we're going with Tightly Wound Coil to generate 40% max HP and shields with every shot when combined with Insulator, and then we're taking Generating Band for big sustain while those shields are active. I've also changed the ammo solution around from Infinity Pocket to Zero Divide, and that's because we need a permanent source of Bulwark to activate our chosen legendary, which is immovable. Dried Clay Ring or Kolket Eyelet with 0 Divide are the best ways to achieve this, although you can also take Whispering Marble on the amulet and stick with Infinity Pocket for more DR and less damage. Now, speaking of the legendary, we can take a look at the Prism. We basically got the same setup here, except instead of evade speed and the munitions fusion, I've got range, crit, and tank. And then, of course, the legendary is immovable. Immovable is, in my opinion, the most broken legendary in the game, allowing you to simplify Remnant down to a math equation and tank through anything. On this build, where we're generating 40% max HP in shields every time we shoot, and then healing for 4.5% max HP per second while that shield is active, we're functionally unkillable as long as we can keep shooting, so immovable is the best option to increase both DPS and survivability. For the weapons, again, this time we've got Mutator on Sporebloom again to generate shields alongside Tightly Wound Coil, and then the melee and handgun don't matter much. I've still got Transference on the melee, and I'm sticking with Song of Aether on the handgun as an auto-win button. For the traits, nothing much has changed here aside from prioritizing Barkskin and picking up Triage, and we're not going into Perception anymore because we don't need to focus on haste as much since we won't be evading at all. And now for some quick demo fights with the tank version of this build, although I won't really show as many because you get the idea. So overall, Sporebloom is just a monstrous weapon right now, and it kind of has everything you could ask for in a gun. It's excellent at mobbing with enough damage to one-tap any trash enemy from within a reasonable distance, and great stagger to control elites and aberrations, while still being great at outputting big boss damage. And as a single-shot weapon, it has plenty of interesting build potential aside from pure damage as well. There is a bit of a skill floor to using it because of the manual reloads, but Sporebloom really can do it all. Take it for a spin, hit those manual reloads, and enjoy.